I just like to fill the background layer with gray so that I can see my texture a little bit better. And then we're going to be doing all the new stuff on a second layer here. Okay, so basically I'm going to continue the strap around to the side. Now, one thing I am going to do, since I think I mentioned this yesterday, normally when I'm doing swords, I do all of the lighting from the tip of the blade down to the hilt, just because when you're dealing with hand-painted texture work, you're painting in a lot of the lighting, and that is the most common way you see the sword, is a character holding the sword and he's holding it up with the blade up. I see a lot of people will texture it from the hilt down lighting, and then the lighting just looks odd whenever the character is actually, running and using the sword. Now in this case, since we have all these faces, you kind of want to put the lighting that makes sense for the face. So we're going to do kind of a little bit of a neutral lighting where there's a little bit of lighting on both sides. And what I'm doing right now is just using the smudge tool. The way I like the texture is I will do some fine detail work, but I also like to just kind of lay down some color. Very sketchy. And then I'll use my smudge tool to actually do the blending. And I have to apologize that I might not be able to answer your questions. I'm really going to be focused on working. I might have a few people from OMNOM in the chat that can answer some of your questions. Otherwise, I'll probably pause every once in a while and just try to get everybody's questions at that point. And you can kind of, well, let me undo that. You can see that there's a seam. It's a little hard to see, but there's actually a seam that runs all the way down this area. Just to maximize my UV space, I actually split this side and this side of the hilt. If I come over here, you can see that one side's up here, and then the other side's here. So doing this projection painting allows me to kind of work over that seam and not have to really worry about it. Okay, so we're really just worrying right now about getting all these straps to kind of run in the right direction, and then I'll go in and do some more detailing in just a little bit. I'll kick that over to 3D coat, and now that I kicked it over to 3D coat, you can see that now it's in 3D. It's no longer the projection. kick that back over. Photoshop. Okay, so I'm gonna set my background to gray again. So the only problem is I lose my gray when I do this, so I always have to refill it. Okay. And the other thing is, I'm not trying to be like super straight with my lines. I like the idea of this being an old, worn strap. So we'll have little wobbles in it from here and there. So. Oh, one thing it looks like we're wrong. There we go. Sorry about that. Okay, and then one thing that this was the area I was talking about right here. Yeah, I just noticed that. This was the area I was talking about right here. Is that I went ahead and put a little wobble in it. You know, I don't want the strap super perfect. The other thing that I want to point out is that I'm a firm believer, and I preach this to my guys, like, you don't have to create and paint everything. If you can reuse stuff, please do. So like when I started doing the wrap part for up here and up here, actually I did one side. I did this side first, and then I copied it over onto this part, flipped it, and then I started worrying about how they match up. And then when I started working on this part, I took this piece and repurposed it here and flipped it and repurposed it here, and now I'm trying to rework them into being a cohesive wrap that goes all the way around. You know, it just takes so much time to uniquely paint everything. So anytime you can reuse, I recommend it. I do the same thing with models. Like when I rarely start with a box anymore. Like I have a whole library of like arms and legs and heads and chests, and I just, you know, Frankenstein together the new character and start going. It gets me into the fun stuff a lot faster. Okay, so another thing I like to do, and this is just something I pulled from working on Darksiders, kind of a part of their style. One way to actually show depth on wraps, I like to break up, when I'm overlaying stuff, I like to break it up and just put a little notch in a piece of wrap that's on top of another piece. And to me, that actually sells the fact that this one is on top of this one a lot more if you can see that this is running underneath this piece. And these little damage nubbins really go a long way to show that. Okay, I'm gonna do a little bit of. I'm gonna do a lighting pass at the very end. Let me again. Let's just get focused on these wraps real quick. It's hard for me not to jump into doing that stuff when I was like noodling a small section. Has always been my little bit of a problem, and I'm consciously trying to break that myself and just kind of work all over a bit more. I'm going to be giving these wraps a little bit of thickness too. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to establish our darkest line at the bottom of the edge. We're going to have a little bit of the mid-tone highlight at the top. And then we're going to come in with another color in between here. Just to kind of give it a little thickness. And when we do our final highlight pass, we'll make this pop even more. I do like the shadows sometimes where I think that wrap is underneath, so I'll make that a little bit darker. And then just kind of smudge it back out. Gives it a little bit of an indent right there. Just subtle. I like a lot of subtle stuff. Just hitting a couple areas I see while I'm here. Okay, I'm going to kick that back over and just get a different position and put it back over here real quick. I'll kick it over to 3 coat. Okay, this is 3 coat. There's my projection, and once I start rotating, it gets committed. Okay, so now we're going to work on this side. Just want to study how I did the wrap first. So I think in this case, I want to continue this one this way. Again, I'm just gonna lay color down. The other thing I like to do is just jump around and if you notice, the colors aren't just perfectly brown. There's like blues and yellows. There's several different colors that are in here, so I like to jump around and grab some of those off colors and just kind of throw it in there, because we're going to be doing the blending in just a moment, and just having some of those colors will make it a little bit more visually interesting. Not so monochromatic, so then we'll just kind of blend them together. So a good question was asked, while the subtle details are nice, how do you know where to use them considering that they won't always be seen in game? At the end of the day, all you're really going to see are these big shapes, and that will be the focal point. It's more of just the thing that I enjoy doing myself, and it's like I kind of always like the idea if anybody ever were to study my textures closely, they would see those little things and enjoy them. And to me, sometimes it's the small things that make the bigger things look correct as well. So like maybe if I just did this as a big solid block color, it would look fine in game, but it'll be more believable if it did have more of these color variations in it, even though you're not consciously seeing those things. I don't know if that makes sense or not. That's kind of how I always felt. You know, like I'm sure if anybody has a wall in front of them that has a texture on it right now, a lot of times if you were to ask somebody like, tell me about that wall, and they would say, oh, it's a white wall. But in actuality, there's a lot of texture and a lot of possibly dirt and grime to it that kind of make up what that wall really is. But at first glance, it's just a white wall. Okay. Yeah, good follow-up. The question was, it does make sense, but you probably add as much detail as you'd like, assuming you meet the deadlines. And yes, at the end of the day, you've got, and that's something else that I've told my guys sometimes too, is like, sometimes you can't put all of, like your masterpiece there. What you can do is do the best you can within the time that's allotted to you. But yeah, as long as you're good with your deadline, and that's the other thing is like doing that stuff now will speed you up later. Like it'll just become second nature, and it'll just be a part of your process and your style, and you'll be faster at it. You know, the more you do something, the faster and more second nature it is with you. So. Hi Parnell. Yeah, I am definitely excited about Battle Chasers. It's I made it. What's funny is that when we first got the opportunity to work on this project, before anybody else knew, I made a post on my Facebook page saying I am now working on one of my dream projects. It was it's pretty awesome to get the opportunity to work on this stuff. Uh, I was a huge I wanted to be a comic book artist. When I was in high school, and one of my favorite comics was Battle Chasers and Joe Mad's work, and getting the opportunity to work with an individual was really, a dream come true. And now actually working on Battle Chasers itself is just phenomenal. Okay, I just about have the hilt completely laid down here. Yeah. So the mystery is now solved. If anybody were ever trying to figure out what I was posting about, it was this Battle Chasers project, and I was working on Garrison at the time. Just gonna clean up the seam real quick. Alright, so here we are in 3D Coat. If I turn off this layer, oops, wrong one. Okay, so if I turn off this layer, you can kind of see what we did here, cleaning up the seams. That's what it was, and that's what it is now. What it was and what it is now. And I kind of ran, you know, as I mentioned, I did one side and then I copied it over, and I did that whole process I just went through for the entire hilt there, getting these wraps to run all the way around. You can now, like if you were to try to trace the path of this wrap here, you can see that it actually does continuously go around. You know, the problem if you were to, and it ends up in here, then there's another wrap that goes over. The problem is if you were to just texture one side of this wrap and then mirror it over to the other side, yes, you probably wouldn't notice because it's in the guy's hand, but what would happen is you would have just rings instead of something that feels like it's actually wrapped around. Honestly, I'm still a little bit. Question was, do you always use projection, or do you sometimes paint in 3D Coat? I'm still kind of new to 3D Coat for the painting stuff, and I'm trying to use it more and more. And what I've been using it lately for is just layout. Like if I see something I need to quickly like make an adjustment to, like if I wanted to sketch the shape out, I would sketch it in 3D Coat, and then I would use Photoshop and projection to do all the actual details. Right now, I just feel I've always used Photoshop. I'm an old school guy, and I just feel more comfortable in Photoshop, and so I try to get it over in Photoshop as often as I can. Okay, so let's get it over into Photoshop, back into flat texture. There we go. So using projection, it took the paints that I just did and it flattened it out onto the texture for me. So if I were to zoom in and turn off this layer, you can see the changes there. Okay, I'm just going to drag that over to my working layer. And like I said, we'll come back and do like highlights and really clean this up and make it a bit sharper later. I'm just going to jump back over let's get some of these other pieces worked out here. I also don't like to work with a lot of layers if I can avoid it, so I want to collapse all my stuff together here. You know, if I'm working on something that's normal mapped, where I need to be able to adjust the AO and all that stuff, I'll typically leave that stuff in as many layers as is needed to be able to make quick edits. But when I'm doing hand painted texture work, I do so much just raw painting that I prefer to keep it flat and into a single layer as much as possible. The only exception is, like I mentioned it last time, is the glaze pass. If you look at this skull here, I have a layer. Let me zoom in on it a little bit more. So I have a layer that I typically do at the end that I call the glaze layer, but it's a layer set filled with black set to color dodge, and I do all these little hot highlights with it on that layer. But for most part, it's I try to keep. Oh, and I also like to keep materials on their own layer as well. So even though I'll flatten this sword layer to paint on top of, and I'll flatten this to keep paint on top of, I keep them separate so that I can make edits to just this or to just this. Here, I'm gonna see if there's any questions real quick. Someone said, I want to get into 3D Coat, learned about it in your stream. Any recommendations on tutorials on how to use the same methods as you? Honestly, there's some gum roads out there that are really good. I can't think of the guy's name off the top of my head, but there's one that I recently watched, a guy from Blizzard. There's also Tyson Murphy has some stuff out there that's really great. He's becoming easily one of my favorite texture artists out there. I would highly recommend. Yeah, Kelvin Tan is the guy that I recently watched, and I'm picking up a lot of 3D Coat stuff from him. But Tyson Murphy though is the guy I would definitely look up his work. His work is phenomenal. What software I use to make the 3D model in? I'm a 3D Studio Max guy. I typically use 3D Max. Although I did use a little bit of quick ZBrush stuff just to kind of get a shape for my sword, and then I retopoed in 3D Coat. I use 3D Coat for retopo on everything. I love 3D Coat for retopoing, by the way. But 3D Coat's really nice because it's a little bit of multiple packages all in one. And it works almost seamlessly with Photoshop as well. I really dig it. All right, so let's get on to some of these other pieces here. Actually, I need to collapse a few layers here. Alright. So right now, I basically have 4 layers total. I've got my wireframe at the top of my stack, and I have it set to screen. Then I have my color dodge layer